Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Future of BizTech. I'm your host, JC Granger, and I have another fantastic guest with us on the show today. And if you end up loving this episode, please show your love and appreciation by following the podcast and subscribing wherever you're listening to. Be sure to give that 5-star review, preferably with some cool comments on there, because that is how other techies like you and I find cool podcasts like this. And today I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing the co-founder and CEO of TravelBank, Chung. Duke, thank you so much for being on the show. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what does TravelBank do?
JC, thank you for having us here. We really appreciate it. And a little bit about myself. I'm a second-time founder. My first business, we built a customer service software technology that we sold in 2014 to Microsoft, which has now become part of the Microsoft CRM customer support product line and has carried through its roadmap and reaches millions of businesses around the world today. So we're very excited about that. That led me to TravelBank. TravelBank is a all-in-one expense travel and card platform for businesses from small to medium and some of the larger businesses as well. We started this business at the end of 2016. We launched in 2017 with expenses and then built out travel and moved into payments. And today we're the only provider out there that has all of it together, delivered in one platform and for one subscription price for all of our customers. Approximately 3,000 businesses around the world today are using TravelBank to enable their employees with expenses and travel and with payment solutions.
That's pretty cool. So you're the only one who brings all three of those aspects. It was travel, cards, and
expense management. That's correct. Yeah.
So why does no one else add that third one? I mean, I guess like what did you see? Like what was that issue in the industry? I mean, why didn't someone just go, oh yeah, let's do all three? I mean, because clearly all three are part of that equation when you're sending, employees out. So I mean, just how did you guys get to be the first one?
Well, it was interesting. So when I moved from the East Coast to Silicon Valley out here in San Francisco, we suddenly had this huge community of startups, and you're talking about thousands and thousands of startups in 2016, 17. And what we realized then was, as we thought about building our suite, where we would start. And we started with expenses. We were the only ones in the travel space that started with expenses. And the reason for that was because most of these smaller businesses, as we think about the value proposition we provide for helping to really control spend for companies, the first thing you think about as a small business is going to be controlling spend for all of your employees, not just travel, but across the board, right? It could be office supplies, it could be software products, it could be marketing budget. You're going to control your spend in one place. So it made sense for us actually to build an expense technology first, because this way we could actually help these companies get going. And when the business scales up to a certain point and begins to mature or go into its growth mode, you're going to start to hire a lot more people. The company is going to transform into a new stage of business. And then businesses start to think a little bit more about, let's go a little bit more narrow and think about how to control spend for travel, because travel becomes a big ticket area of spend. It could be as much as 20% of your overall spend as you scale up your business. And so that led us to building more functionality around a travel program, including a travel platform where you can book travel across 400 airlines, 650,000 hotels, and all the major ground transportation services. And to kind of bring that all together into a travel program as an extension of expenses. So that's how we led from expenses to travel. And then through the pandemic, I think is really where we pushed on payments a lot. And I think we're the early evolutions of that because payments is transforming so quickly. And what the pandemic really did was it made everything contactless. It actually forced what I would classify as a behavioral change. During the pandemic, if you wanted to go down the street and buy a coffee or buy a sandwich or pay for something, suddenly you find yourself using your phone and paying with your mobile wallets. Mm-hmm. And that was very transformational from when we first started this business. We started this business time, we're still using credit cards, right? More dominantly. Now, we're finding ourselves using our phones more for identity management and also for payments. So bringing payments into this flow was really a nice way to kind of expand our offering. And today we're the only ones that have all three built by ourselves organically, the technologies all unified into one experience.
So that payments part, I want to dig a little more on that because I think a lot of people totally understand the travel part, they understand the expense part, right?
Mhm.
Expense reports and plane tickets. Okay, we got that. But
Mhm.
the payments, so I want to go deeper here. So is this kind of like, for example, we use American Express, right? And so and
Sure,
Amex
sure.
makes it very easy for me to order an
Yeah.
employee card and have it sent to them, so that they can put things on there and I can view it in my dashboard. I can freeze it. I can up its limit, down its limit, whatever I want to do.
Mhm.
Walk me through how similar is what you're doing to that, and then is it agnostic to any given type of like Visa, MasterCard, Discover, Amex, or
Mhm.
do you guys partner with one, or is it just a platform that links into their phone and they can use anything they want and it just grabs the data? Like, that's where I'm going with this.
Great question. Great question. So I'll go in reverse. When you're using our expense system, we link up to 14,000 cards, personal and corporate cards. So your American Express card would work perfect. And the way it would work is you just sync up to your card account. And as you spend money on your American Express card, or your employees do, imagine every transaction will automatically fill into your expense report. So we basically curate your expense report in the back end so that at the end, depending on how you set up your business, you might have some requirements for receipts, for compliance. You can set that all customized to your own business. And we'll just help you enforce that so that when the user submits it, you're fully compliant as far as the expense report. So imagine that experience. So that we call sort of generation one, just link it up to a credit card. In generation two, what we built with payments kind of takes that concept a step further. You mentioned, American Express, I want to send a new employee a card. You can still do that, but now imagine that in the digital virtual form. So you could go to our application and you could actually select the employee you want to send it to. And you can send them a virtual card. You can send them a virtual card for $5,000 because they're running an event for you.
Mhm.
And you can actually specify specific categories they can spend it on. You can also specify when it expires, so you can only use it up to 2 weeks. And then other requirements that you can add on there. So it's very controlled, if you will. And you can send this anytime you want, and as many virtual cards as you want. And once these virtual cards are sent to your employee, they'll have access to use it both online. They'll generate a 16-digit code for them. They could spend it on Amazon if they need to. But more importantly, it integrates automatically into their mobile wallet. So if they go on travel, they can book all their travel through us, of course. But then let's say you go to the airport and you're going to buy a cup of coffee or expense your lunch. Well, you can just take your mobile phone out with your wallet. I'll have the virtual card already built in there, and you go ahead and spend it. Now, everything you spend on the virtual card automatically populates into your expense report as well. So in both generation one and generation two, but generation two is all about the digital virtual card. And we think that is very much the future, because what it does is it gives the employers more control into how these cards are issued. So instead of sending an executive a $30,000 credit limit and then having to audit all their expenses, you can actually kind of go more granular and send these virtual cards out on a per use case basis, and therefore giving the CFOs much more control around how this money is being distributed and democratized across their employee base.
That's pretty cool, and that I can see how that could be, especially like you said, if a company's growing and being able to just quickly distribute these. But and
Exactly.
it doesn't just have to be for travel. Like for I have a marketing agency, so
Right.
sometimes I have employees that need to pay for certain softwares on their own. I'm like, yeah, go get that software, just put it on your card, right, so that
Exactly.
it automatically hits.
Exactly.
So what types of companies are you finding? You have 3,000 companies in your portfolio,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as far as client base. What size, what industries do you find have the most need and benefit from this? Is there any kind of method to the madness? Is there any groupings of certain
we're,
industries
we're
or size of
we're
companies?
seeing it all across the board, for small businesses, particularly more nimble businesses or technology startups. Right, they are quick to change. So newer technologies like ours, they adopted very quickly. They find it to be more efficient. And they are starting from the beginning, right? So a lot of them are building their credit card programs, and this is almost like a new generation on how the approach is working for them. And they intend to continue to start here and expand as we innovate around virtual cards as well. And these are, think of startups, very small businesses that gets going, but also long tail, could be bakeries, could be small businesses here and there. We also serve a lot of mid-market businesses. Mid-market businesses for us are businesses anywhere between 100 million to, say a billion, in that range of revenue. So there's a good amount of businesses there that we serve today. And they are all fully on travel. They're fully on expenses. And they're just beginning their migration from plastic card to this virtual digital card. And they may enter this in a hybrid approach, meaning they're still going to issue some plastic cards, but they're beginning to, these ancillary use cases that you talked about, they're starting to use those, especially for employees they don't want to give a plastic card to. So this is a really great way for them to kind of expand that use case. Then you have larger businesses, and I'll give you a couple examples. Larger businesses that we serve are businesses like DoorDash. Like DoorDash employees are all on TravelBank. We manage all their travel expenses, or Grubhub or SoulCycle, these kind of businesses. So at that stage where the revenue is over $1 billion, you're at full scale. And for CFOs and the controllers that are using our programs, this is really the holy grail for them. It gives them absolute control. They have visibility into the spend. They have visibility into the controls of the spend before it's issued, but they have real-time visibility into what's being spent as well, because all of the entire organization is standardized typically on 1 or 2 cards. So all the spend is now being visualized in real time through our dashboards for these controllers. And that's really transformational, because if you think about where we came from, most finance teams don't have visibility into what you've spent until you've done your expense report. And now we have a value proposition where if you're issuing all these virtual cards out there to employees and they're using it on the go every day for all the different use cases, every single transaction is automatically captured and visualized by the finance teams. So they have visibility into what's being spent at any given time. So that's really, really exciting on that side. So we're definitely pushing the envelope up to the bigger enterprises, but we think really that this will transcend from small to medium to large.
Okay, and so how are you right now trying to go up market? I'm a marketing guy, so I always have to ask the marketing questions.
Yeah.
Like what types of verticals in marketing are you guys using? What did not work in the past? What do you see working pretty well for you guys right now?
So we sell into the back office finance. CFOs are traditionally very conservative groups. They don't, when it comes to technology changes, it's from my experience from my first business into this business, they're not early adopters. They don't need to be, they're risk averse. They frankly don't really like to make a lot of changes if something's working. They don't have to use the latest and greatest. In your example, being running a marketing consultant, you may like the latest and greatest technologies for marketing.
I
the
do.
CFOs are very different, right? CFOs are very different. They would rather everyone else test it first, and it works. And it doesn't have to be the Tesla. As long as it works, it's reliable, then it's good, right? So I think that because of that, our strategy for going upstream or moving upstream really is we've grown a lot with the early stage companies. When I look at DoorDash, we had the opportunity to serve them when they were in the hundreds of employees, and now they're in the thousands of employees. And it was just a matter of 2 to 3 years that they've scaled up, and we've kind of grown with them over time. But we're also in, interestingly, some health verticals like healthcare. OSF Healthcare is a good example. It's a $3 billion business running hospitals in the Illinois, Chicago area. And we manage all the travel and expenses for them. West Tennessee Healthcare Systems in Tennessee, we manage all of the travel expenses. So these are large organizations where we've come in and we have replaced older systems that have poor user experiences, aren't integrated in together, don't have mobile functionality, and certainly don't have this next generation virtual card capabilities. They're just too far behind. And as we know, a lot of these large institutions, they are hiring younger generation employees coming in, for the future. And the younger generation has grown up with these functionalities. They expect to be able to go to the phone and book your flight and hotel, to see your itinerary, to not have to go through 10 steps to do an expense report. So the nice thing about this is all integrated, it's all modern, and it's all really designed for the user experiences, particularly for the users, the travelers that are out there. And, the pandemic has really changed the way we travel, and I think it's going to change the future of travel too. And what I mean by that is before the pandemic, you had a small number of people who traveled a lot. So this might be the C-level team, the marketing teams, and the sales teams. Now we're in a setup where you have employees everywhere, all over the US, maybe all over the world. So all of a sudden you have a lot of spend from a lot of infrequent travelers. And that means that companies are now scrambling to figure out how they can gain more control over the spend, because it's not just a small group of people spending a lot of money traveling. You've got a lot of people now traveling. And the reason they're traveling is because more companies in the remote work world are encouraging off sites and events and conferences as a means to get together now, because they may not be asking you to come back to the office, but people are taking the companies up more for wanting to go out to do these offsites and events. And so you're going to see a lot more travel from every single employee across the company. And that's a huge transformation in what the pandemic has done. But I think our technologies are in line with the change of the world, and we're innovating very closely against that. Okay.
So you talked about the future, right? So this being the future of BizTech, I have a couple of future questions for you now. So you are in a somewhat competitive industry, right, of what you guys do. Where do you see, and you touched on this a little bit with the virtual payments and the contactless, but in the next 5-10 years in the industry that you're in, with you plus your competitors, where do you see things going, right? Notwithstanding, we can dig deeper into that one you mentioned, but is there anything that's going to be affected by, AI or other technology or legislation or anything like that? Where do you see the industry going in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to companies like yours?
Yeah, we see a few key trends happening. On the AI side, I think we're in a race to gather data around that. And, in our business, we sit on top of 14,000 credit cards. We're running expense reports and have a lot of compliance data. Of course, we keep everything confidential and private to each of our entities that we serve and the respective users alone. So we look at the data anonymized, but what the data can do for us is really build a moat to enable a framework for future AI use cases. And some examples of that may come in for things like personalization. So I could say, hey, JC, when you travel, when you're heading into the airport, we're going to tell you there's a Pete's Coffee there. And you're going to say, well, how would you know I like Pete's? Well, we know you like Pete's because if you look at your expense reports, well, we see a lot of Pete's expenses in there, right? So that's just a very simple example, right? Another example, when it comes to actually auditing and compliance, having a lot of data mode is really valuable, because when another employee expenses another coffee, we can check to see if other employees in the business have expense in a similar location for similar amounts, right? And all these benchmarks are actually established in our data cloud. And so that serves as an ongoing strategy for us. And our vision over time, frankly, on expenses is one where we can introduce the world's first autonomous expense report system. One that actually will not only build an expense report for you behind the scenes, but it can auto approve your expense report. And I think we can do it better than what a manager or mid-level manager or finance team can do, because we can provide much more structure around the approval processes. At the minimum, we can provide guidance to the users and the managers, but over time, I think as we're seeing in the auto space, right, for autonomous cars, I think those kind of applications can be applied into our use cases here for expenses. So personalization, compliance use cases, and of course, leading data trends with the data that we're collecting to kind of predict things that we should assemble into our marketplace of other experiences that our users potentially could benefit from. Those are all things that we're doing around data. And we think data is a really important part of the future on this side. And that's why we're also interested in teaming up the banks, because the banks and us together, coming together, can also provide more synergies around data, around payments. But I also think the future will be more about not only expense travel, but actually coming closer with the banking environments. Today we have a partnership with Brex and through them we serve thousands of startups. And we also have started a new relationship with US Bank, which is the 5th largest bank in the world, and they have 100,000 customers here in North America. And we're working with them. And the synergies that we bring together between the finance side and expense and travel really is about being able to offer more compelling value propositions back to the businesses in a way where we could be more aggressively giving back rebates, for example. Imagine if you run TravelBank with one of our banking partners, instead of getting 1% back or 2% cash back, you could possibly get 3%, maybe even 4% back. And that shows you the power of bringing together all the systems into one place so that there's more value back for the companies in a way that would be very difficult to do if you had to assemble this yourselves from a company perspective.
I
So we
really,
see that coming through.
yeah, I really like the auto approval part you were talking about, because what I find interesting about that is that I imagine you could set certain thresholds where it'll auto approve unless something breaks a certain line. You know, like a manager doesn't have to sit there and go through every single expense report, but they could get like an alert that says, hey, this one just looks a little weird. Like this one, because the data will tell it that that's maybe abnormal, right? Especially if you have a whole team of people that went out to the same location and all their expense reports are here, and there's one person who's like way up here. I imagine that,
Yep.
you know, that an algorithm could point and flag things, right? So I think that's really cool. And then on the other hand, if it automatically disapproves it, you would obviously be able to have the employee to challenge it, and that could send it to a manager or something like that. So I think that's really cool.
That's right. That's right.
Saves a lot of time in that efficiency process, which is really nice. So now let's talk about, okay, so my audience likes the inside scoop. All right. So we're going to ask about your company specifically, not the industry. I just want to know about TravelBank. What is something that's coming up soon that you guys are going to be maybe launching, maybe feature wise? You know, what's the next cool big thing on the roadmap that everyone here can look forward to?
Well, there's a couple areas in expenses, you know, with the extension of payments. We're looking at broad areas where we take the payment contact list to the next level. And a good example there is, imagine now going to the hotel where you don't even have to check in at the front desk. We have your mobile wallet. I could say, JC, here's your room number 2808, and that will show up right in your itinerary.
You go straight through to your room.
You go straight to your room. Now take the same idea and say, imagine going to the airport. And today the airports are designed to have a check-in service in the front. It takes quite a bit of real estate, as you know, right? You've got these kiosks, you've got people there checking bags. But what if I said to you, JC, go right to gate 13 and hover your phone over there to check into your flight, and boom, you're on there. Imagine what that would do to transform the airports today. It would simplify it down very significantly. And then if you go to the car rental, right, like now Hertz is purchasing Teslas, everything's moving digital. You know, you don't have to go through the Hertz line anymore. You don't have to wait even for your name to show up on the board.
Yeah.
JC, you're going to go straight to your car. And by the way, your car doesn't have to be at the airport. Everyone thinks, okay, your car's, because in the future of autonomous driving cars, your car can be anywhere.
Yeah, just come pick you up.
It come pick you up. Exactly. Come pick you up right at the airport, right? And you hop right in, you hover it with your phone. It becomes not only your payments, but it also becomes your identity management. So we think the future of business travel is going to change very fast. And that's why we're so interested in this area, because we can help create the future here with bringing these technologies into one place. So that's one big area of focus for us that we're looking at that's really fascinating. And there's a lot of innovation happening with all the major banks out there on this effort to kind of digitalize your identity and your payments into a way that's really streamlined. So we're really, really excited about that. Outside of this, you know, the other areas we're really looking at are things like ESG, you know, improving the climate, putting more awareness around travel. Because as you know, in our generation growing up, we had a lack of awareness around a lot of these things. And we think we're in a great position now to be able to introduce more awareness in. So when you travel, when you spend things that you're going to expense, we can give you a report and say, JC, based on this trip, you've created all these carbon emissions, right? For example. So
sounds like it sounds like a guilt report, though. I don't know.
possibly. Well, it's a phase one, right? So, and like I said, it's more of an awareness thing. You just don't know what you've done. And the idea isn't really to force you to make any changes, but I think the initial goal is to make people more aware. And we're seeing this to be a huge, you know, more important focus for our world. And because we are in the business of booking travel for our constituents, we're in a great position to display this information and really to provide more insights and awareness for our users. And we think that's really important moving forward. So
it's
there's
like
going to be more work on that.
It's like nutrition facts on the McDonald's menu now. You're like, oh, listen, I'm still going to get the Big Mac, but like at least I'm aware of what I'm doing to myself, right?
That's right. 600 calories. Frankly, I don't know if it will stop you from eating it, but but at least right? And
I
in
might
fact,
try
you
to
don't
cut back on how many per week then. Maybe that's the idea, right?
That's
Well,
true.
and
That's true.
what you bring up is interesting though, because if you start showing, again, like nutrition facts, it's not that it's going to stop actions on some mass scale like day one, but being aware helps plant a seed. And then that grows in your mind. And what happens is, and just historically from what I've seen, is then people start to voice that. So for example, I could see a scenario where in the future, let's say what you're doing is it becomes widely adopted and there's a carbon footprint. It breaks it down by like, well, you took a Airbus 737, or a, 400, and then you took a Boeing, 737, and you see the difference. There could be a scenario where employees start saying, hey, if you wouldn't mind, I'd prefer to be booked on this airline because they use these more conscious planes. And then that forces the airlines to then invest in better, more efficient planes because people are canceling flights because they're on, gas hogs, so it pushes in that direction, which I think is actually pretty cool. Yeah,
it is
like
cool.
that.
And the other areas that it influence behavior. So for example, let's say you're going on a multi-city trip, right? You may consider, instead of doing a lot of short leg hops, you may consider to go to a place and just stay there a little longer, because that will change your behavior as well, right? So when you think about planning your business trips, it changes behavior based on the carbon emissions footprint. If you're doing a lot of hops and getting a lot of flights, it'll kind of give you a bigger report around how many emissions you're generating, right? So I think on a behavioral change, it also has some impact. But you're absolutely right. I think what we're really excited about is the awareness is really maybe not so much about the users as awareness for them. It's much more about the suppliers. We dream of this day where the planes aren't fully reliant on gas. I mean, if the day that Tesla gets into the electric plane, for example, right? Who's going to build that? Nobody's going to build that today unless we actually build more awareness into improving the climate. That's going to push the suppliers to innovate. But unless that awareness is actually established today, there's no reason to actually push on that end. So I think where this will impact the world is going to force innovation all across the board, across the travel industry. And we're excited about that. We're excited about being at the forefront and building that early awareness and adoption, and actually pushing for future innovation to make the world a better place, essentially. So, and that's our role.
I like that. Socially conscious company.
Exactly.
I like that.
Exactly.
So let's ask a personal question about you. Let's talk about Duke for a second. So when you were a kid, right, and you were like 10 years old, and someone's like, what are you gonna do when you grow up? And then you answered, what was that answer? And then is that what you're doing now? And if not, how did how did that path, change and get you here?
When I was growing up, my dream was to be a detective. And I think maybe it has to do with the books you read, but I always loved, growing up, like all these different books around mysteries and solving crimes, right? I love that. I always was really fascinated about that.
Columbo and Murder, She Wrote, man. Those are my two favorite
shows
as a kid.
Yeah.
Columbo and Murder, She Wrote.
Hey, there you go. I know them well. I know them all well. And so I always dream. I mean, for Halloween, I always dressed up as a detective, and I loved it. I can't say that's what I do today, but other than probably the closest similarity might be, when you're problem solving is probably the best example of it I can extract from what I inspired to be growing up. When you're solving crimes and trying to solve a problem, I feel like when we're doing these startups, and frankly all these new things that come around, right? They're sort of new challenges that are set forth in front of us.
Like a puzzle. It's just one big puzzle.
There you go. Exactly. It's a puzzle, and you've got to figure out how to, solve these puzzles, right? And then once you solve this puzzle, well, there's going to be another puzzle, right? It keeps going. That's what's actually sort of exciting. It's sort of an ongoing series of crime scenes that you've got to solve over the time to kind of get to the other side.
Hold on. Wait. Here's what I love about what you just said. You basically just equated entrepreneurship to coming across multiple crime scenes, and I could not agree with you more.
Well, I've never said that on a podcast or anywhere, but now that, since you've asked the question, JC, now I can actually kind of step back and think about it more clearly, but it does feel like that, right?
And they're all bloody too. They're all like mass murder style.
That will save for the second podcast, the more details around it, but you've built your business too, and others out there who have as well. It's almost what we do every day, right? We're looking at these challenges, but some would say they're mostly opportunities, right? You kind of look at these challenges that we have today and you're trying to solve and make it better for the future. So that's fun. That's actually very fun. I think that's probably the number one thing that keeps us going. Like we picked an industry to build something in, and then how do we kind of help this industry move forward? So that's
awesome.
Yeah.
You seem like a very educated man, especially if you're a puzzle person. You have to be, well read. I'm sure you watch documentaries a lot too, especially that real crime stuff, So let me ask
CSI.
that. Yeah. Oh yeah. All of them, all the things. I like the true crime series personally. It's funny. I saw a meme the other day that it said, because, Halloween and whatnot. And it said, it was like me watching a scary movie. And there was like, and then it was like me watching a movie, like a real crime. It's like, ooh, like.
Yeah. The real crime, I have to say, JC, is a little darker, I think, than the regular ones, right? The intents seem like they're always a little bit darker, or at least they're written that way.
Yeah.
So, but I know, I hear you loudly on that.
That's funny. Last question then. So which keys to this question, which is if you had to pick a must-read book or documentary, watch documentary or podcast, not this one, but I mean like just for business stuff, right? If you had to pick a podcast, a documentary, or a book that someone listening absolutely should engage in, what would it be and why?
I think, I'll go with the book. I think, there were two books really, but I'll talk about one of them that really inspired me through my personal journey, entrepreneurship journey, was Tony Hsieh's book from Delivering Happiness. I thought that was really well thought out and well written, and talks a lot about like at the end of the day, we go through these journeys, and what's the final destination, right? What are we really all aspiring for? And what you realize is that those that are say very wealthy today, or those that are kind of very poor today, they all have their own struggles, but actually the happiest people that I found are really the people that are somewhere in the middle, that have the aspiration to achieve something great. And oftentimes what we talk about is the success, the earned success, call it that, is really what is the drivers for the pursuit of happiness. Meaning, you go through all these struggles to build these businesses and challenges that we talked about. And ultimately, when you get to the other side, when you've solved the problems and you do it over and over and over again, and you almost kind of see like a graph that goes up, right? You kind of look back, it's almost just a series of challenges that you've solved over and over. And then you kind of get to the top, and whatever that top is defined for you, along the way. And you look back, that is really what I would classify as the pursuit of happiness. And he talks a lot about that. He talks about, what we do every day, why we do it, and what makes us happy. And ultimately those are the biggest drivers, right? And a lot of people, equate happiness to wealth or other visible things. But in reality, I think when we look at what we're doing outside of all those things, it's truly just this sort of graph of earned success, like going through the grief and the stress, if you will, along the way. And in one word to say, maybe that's really just the cost of success, the cost of commitment over time, without having to go through these difficult periods of times. You can look at the pandemic and all that. If one were to look at that and kind of capitalize on it, you get some tremendous outcomes out of that. And those are the things that ultimately make people really happy in what we do, make us more fulfilled over time. So I think that book really changed the way I thought about my own journey for my first business, and also for TravelBank, and I think for future ones as well. So that's one I really would recommend for people to read through, to spend time to be inspired by it.
Yeah, no, I read that book too. And the one inspiration that came to me from that book years ago was that we got rid of financial goals in my agency, right? So a lot of people say, what's your goals for 2021, 2022, whatever, right? And they're talking about revenue goals. And I tell them, well, we don't have any. I'm like, well, how can you not have any? How do you know? I'm like, well, because our only goal is to be remarkable, right? Because when you have a financial goal, and this is just my opinion, this is what I took away from the book kind of thing, just how it inspired me, is that you turn your clients into extractions, right? Like your goal, the mindset is you're extracting financial gain out of them for you. When your goal is to be remarkable, you are injecting your expertise and the value that you give for them. And
that's right.
It both will lead to this. You'll still make money, The difference is where is your mindset? And so that's what I took from, that's one of the big things that I took from the book that we put
That's awesome.
into action here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we don't have fun. We have no financial goals. We have taxes we got to file. We know what we made at the end of the year, but we don't have we're going to 2x this year. It's like, no, we are going to figure out how to be twice as efficient as we were last year. We're going to figure out how to get twice as many leads for a client this year. And when those become the goals, the money will come, right? And so I'm glad you mentioned that book. I thought that was a great book too.
I think, yeah. When I met Tony a few times. He spoke at my conference because I was in the customer service business, so I got a chance to know him. Unfortunately, as you know, we were so sad to see him leave ultimately. But when I visited him in his office, he shared a similar story to the one you shared, which was we took a tour. He used to do these tours, and he would personally do the tours. So you go around his office, and all these people would be so happy. And there was a group of people on a corner on a phone, kind of isolated. So I asked Tony, I said, who are those people over there? And he said, oh, those people are server specific function. And he said, there are certain people, let's say of lower income and can't qualify for higher credit. So let's say, for example, you have a credit card and you only have $500 limit on it. Well, sometimes let's say you bought a pair of white shoes for an upcoming wedding you're attending, but it turns out you actually needed black shoes. You're not actually able to purchase the black shoes because you don't have enough credit limit. So what that group was actually doing was saying to the customers, well, we understand your problem and we'll go ahead and send you the black pair of shoes first. And when you're done, just when you come back from your wedding, go ahead and send us the white shoes back. And they were willing to do that. So from a financial decision, if one were to look at this and run a business from a P&L and say, why would you ever do that, right? You're not only increasing risk, you're dealing with, lower income earners and you might have certain biases around why this doesn't make any sense to do at all. But what they learned through this process in the spirit of delivering happiness was that by doing this, they earned the trust and the loyalty of these customers. And not only did they return their shoes back, as they said they would, but they came back over and over again to buy more things from them. And that long-term sort of lifetime value of the customer was really what they were looking to acquire, not the short-term transaction, right?
And so that's what the short-term versus the long. Exactly. So I want to make sure that people know how to get a hold of you, Duke, and the company. So first, for anyone who's listening who wants to reach out to you personally, maybe they are upmarket, right? And they like what you had to say today. How do they reach you personally? And then how do people find the website?
The best way to find me, you can find me on Twitter, Duke Chung, Instagram, Facebook is fine, or you can email me at duke@travelbank.com would be perfectly fine as well.
That's awesome. And for everyone out there listening, again, if you liked what you heard today here, if you like listening to Duke and myself, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, give that 5-star rating we talked about in the beginning, put some writing behind it so other techies like us can find it and enjoy learning about all these amazing and helpful B2B softwares on the market today. Dukes, thank you so much for being on the show, and I appreciate it. I'm going to be checking it out because, like I said, I like that the digital payment thing, be able to control the spending of employees virtually. So thank you so much for showing all of us that.
Thank you, JC. Thanks for having me here.
Bye-bye.